Hi, my friends. Our topic is bias and corruption in research and a way to prevent it. This is something I'm very passionate about because in modern times, we use modern research methods to figure out how things work, what works effectively. And this is really wonderful. We can take it for granted, but we are no longer living in a time where, at least in theory, in concept, our fundamental principles are that we are no longer just relying on traditional beliefs, myths, stories that are handed down to us, whatever particular set of rules and regulations and concepts we happen to be born into, and primarily basing our decisions on inherited understanding. We now have this idea of research, compare, contrast, see what the facts are. In principle, it's a fantastic and wonderful idea, and I believe it usually works. I'm very passionate about this. I have a master's degree in research and evaluation methodology, and there is one particular thing that is slowing down even greater potential, much greater potential and opportunity and progress for all of us, and that is the bias and corruption. And I'm going to present here a way to prevent, to stop the ongoing corruption and prevent it in the future. For example, there is bias in medical research. This bias is essentially a form of corruption where the influence of money leads to findings that are untrue or sometimes exaggerated. This is fundamental and powerful. I think a lot of us have gotten accustomed to it. We're familiar with it. It seems like there isn't anything to do about it. It's controlled by powers that are larger than us. But let's examine this a little bit, because there's something that I think is fairly simple and straightforward that can be done to stop this corruption. First of all, let me confirm that there is corruption. This bias, typically driven by money or arrogance, is pervasive. And this is well known, and it's documented in the academic journals. It's not just a criticism coming from the outside, it's a criticism from the inside as well. Even though there's an awareness of this, there seems to be difficulty in doing anything about it. So I have a quote here from a academic article, and I give the website address if you want to read it. Conclusion: systematic bias favors products which are made by the company funding the research. Period. It's true. This is what's happening. Companies fund the research, and it helps their products sell. It's that simple. Here on this slide, this is kind of long, but I'm going to go through this because this is incredible. This is amazing. And again, I give the website address if you want to read, at the bottom here, if you want to read the entire paper. First of all, I'm going to quote here. First of all, the entire medical discipline is heavily influenced by pharmaceutical companies. We hear this. There's rumors about this. Is it really true? Marcia Angell, however you say her last name, who served as editor of what is probably the most important medical journal in the world, the New England Journal of Medicine, wrote a lucid and disquieting analysis of the current state of psychiatry, highlighting its weaknesses and the heavy influences of drug companies. This is the editor of the New England Journal of Medicine writing this. And now I have in bold: Big Pharma virtually supports, directly or indirectly, every journal and scientific meeting of the field. Without the income due to advertisements, most psychiatric journals would cease publications and many meetings would be canceled. Cancellations of important national meetings due to lack of financial support by pharmaceutical companies indeed occurred. This is coming from the editor of the New England Journal of Medicine. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not just some wild weirdos whining and complaining and having all kinds of bizarre ideas. There is systematic bias through the pharmaceutical companies. This is well documented. This is highly supported and understood by leaders within the medical community. To continue with the last sentence of this bold section here, by the way, I bolded this. If you go to the original, I just bolded this section because I want to emphasize it. Also, the scientific information that reaches every practitioner is heavily controlled by pharmaceutical companies. This can sound like some kind of wild outsider criticizing the system. These are people who are part of the medical system, leaders in the field, editors of major journals, pointing out this problem. It is pervasive, it is corrosive, it is making us less effective, less productive. We're not providing the health care that we should because of simply incorrect information. It is well documented that psychotropic medications such as anti-anxiety and antidepressant drugs are prescribed mostly by general practitioners. In some countries, medications are freely advertised on TV and in popular magazines. Note that they too need advertisements for survival, creating false expectations in the population, wrong beliefs on the etiology and treatment of common psychological problems, and a growing need to seek the advertised drugs from their physicians. The research is biased. The advertising goes out to tell the consumers about this. It's just pervading the entire field from the research to identify what's effective, to the practitioners, the doctors who are given incentives to use these drugs, to the consumers who are also given advertisements on the effectiveness. They don't miss anybody. The whole process heavily influenced by these pharmaceutical, by the pharmaceutical industry. I got to read this first sentence of the bold again. Big Pharma virtually supports and directly or indirectly every journal and scientific meeting of the field. Unbelievable. Okay, to continue. This next bold section. Pharmaceutical companies finance most, if not all, randomized controlled trials on the efficacy of medications. What? Nearly all randomized, they're funding all of this? This has obvious consequences on the decision of which studies have to be done, and those on the drugs the pharmaceutical companies will launch on the market, and especially the criteria for publication of studies. Oh my God, this is unbelievable. This is what's going on. So I have a little pop-up here. This is madness. We are living in a corrupt system, and think about it. If you go back in history and you think about in the United States, 100, 150, 200 years ago, slavery everywhere. People just turned their heads. We might think, we're more enlightened, we're not as prone, if I lived then, I wouldn't just turn my head on that. Well, we're doing it right now. We're ignoring massive corruption that's hurting millions and millions, the majority of people. And we're not saying anything about it because it's the same old story. There's something ingrained in the system that seems difficult to change. When there are crime organizations, et cetera, there's lots of abuses going on. Today we're doing the same thing that we as human beings have always done. Just turn our heads, ignore it, and say, there's nothing we can do about it. There is something we can do about it. There's several things we can do about it. Also, it's not just medicine. Even in the field of physics, which I often think of as the most pristine of the sciences because of its distance from human activity. Medical treatments has to do with people and what people purchase and take care of their health, very fundamental. It's very difficult to measure what's going to be effective. It's just an area very easily prone to corruption. But even something like physics has its share of problems. There's a video by physicist Sabine Hassenfelder, and the name of the video is My Dream Died and Now I'm Here. My Dream Died and Now I'm Here. You can go to YouTube and type that in and you'll see it. Heart-rending story of her challenges in academia is when I watch it, that's how I felt. So we live in an imperfect world. And in my opinion, most of academia is wonderful. I don't want to make it sound like the system doesn't work. It does work overall. But it's not perfect. And particularly in the some fields like medicine, the corruption is extensive. So what do we do about it? You think, okay, why don't we pass regulations? Why don't we get the willpower? It's like a moving truck. How do you stop the momentum of this? Well, instead of just trying to stop this moving target, there's something else we can do rather than tell them just stop, which is this: feature the alternatives. So, in other words, removing Big Pharma can be difficult. It's maybe not even advisable, but how do you stop it? Well, maybe we don't focus so much on stopping it as we do on having a level playing field. Support other research. Well, of course, some of Big Pharma, some people are going to fight that, but it's much easier to bring in alternative viewpoints, to have other academic journals feature alternative viewpoints. Right now, what we see is, YouTube, social media, flooded with alternatives, people struggling to find them. As these and by the way, they're called alternatives, anything other than the endorsed particular system of healthcare. These other methods need to stand up and deliver their message in formal, clear, peer-reviewed journals as well as in popular media. So journals can disappear, funding can dry up. We can also fund research on alternative treatments. Current funding sources may lose some enthusiasm and support. In other words, if we bring in more studies on alternative methods, on herbs, chiropractic, massage, etc., other modalities for healing, in addition to the pharmaceutical drug therapies and things like that, maybe the Big Pharma will pull out a little bit, but it won't create the major disruption, conflict, fighting, and polarization of just saying, stop, what are you doing? Because not even all of that corruption is conscious. It's not even maliciously intended. The people have indoctrinated themselves into believing that this is true, that this is proper, that this is correct. After all, they're funding the research. What could be wrong with that? They're giving money to it. It's not as simple as, oh, there's an evil, just stop it. It's complex. What we need to do is bring in more of the alternatives by bringing in support, endorsement, a voice to different points of view. That's what's needed. And that is a fundamental principle of modern research methods, to triangulate the problem, to see it from different points of view, to have alternative theoretical frameworks. The modern research methods itself tells us that we must use different theoretical frameworks, that we must not have bias in the research, where the outcome we have a particular desired outcome because of the personal benefits involved, the conflict of interest. This violates the principles of modern research methods. What we need to do is simply implement the research methods, bring in different points of view, have peer review, not just by people who are established in that way of thinking. So as we have professors, research scientists, experts brought into the academic environment, as they are invited to peer review those articles from different perspectives, and then let the debates begin. This is the answer, or an answer. Allow different voices to be heard. They must adhere strictly to all of the scientific requirements. This is not a liberalization and a weakening of the criteria. It's a strengthening of the criteria to make sure that we've triangulated the problem. We see it from different points of view. Right now, there's a very large market for alternative therapies, some of which can hurt the profits of those who provide the currently endorsed therapies. There will be difficult changes by bringing in different voices, by supporting different points of view, by supporting rigorous, careful research from different theoretical frameworks, when people endorsing different modalities and having them go up against each other and let the data speak for itself. But overall, amidst all those conflicts, there will be changes for enormous improvements. So my proposal for stopping the massive corruption of money that's controlling research in the medical fields is to endorse and support people who have other points of view and to interface these different points of view. Very simple. That's what we need to do. So I've mentioned these problems occur in many, many fields. In the field in which I research, I have a similar problem. It's not as conspicuous and obvious. It's more subtle, but it's very insidious and very negative. I work in all areas of, you might say, fringe, what people could call fringe areas of research, things like astrology, believe it or not. Well, there are three groups of people researching astrology, three that I've identified anyway. There are the cynics of astrology, people like Jeffrey Dean. They've done extensive research on astrology. They've written books that are many hundreds of pages long. Jeffrey Dean wrote a book back in, what was it, the early 1980s or late 70s. Now they've come out with another book by Dean and his colleagues. Giant books, hundreds and hundreds of pages showing research after research after research showing that astrology is nonsense, which of course agrees with what most scientists expect. They never find any validation in astrology. But then there's another group of people. Many of them are mathematicians, masters and PhD degrees in mathematicians. They have expertise in research as well. People like Kjosti Tarvainen, Vincent Godbout, and they publish articles very often in a journal called the Correlation Journal, and they publish in other places. And they produce research that shows high confidence that some of the ideas that are fairly popular in modern Western astrology are producing real results, measurable effects. Whoa! There could actually be some truth to the astrology that people are practicing. Sounds bizarre, sounds crazy, but there are a group of people doing it and getting success. Does group number one, the cynics of astrology, also popular scientists who make statements about astrology being nonsense, do they ever look at that research by the astrology? Yes, sometimes they do, and sometimes they heavily criticize it. But then there's a third group of people doing research in astrology. I'm a member of that third group, where my colleagues and I, we write papers, we publish an enormous number of YouTube videos. I've made over 700 YouTube videos, over 100 of them on the research studies. That does not use the modern research methods, uses a whole new system of complex pattern recognition and wave theory. It's a whole new paradigm of how the patterns of the cosmos are resonating and reflecting in the patterns in our lives. Also a wild, crazy idea relative to what we believe in modern science, what we, or I should say, understand from findings in modern science. But there can be things modern science has not discovered yet, of course. And so this third group, of which I am a member, is using terms like, we call it sometimes cosmic cybernetics or vibrational cosmobiology, to distinguish it from the rules of astrology. And in my research, and the research of my colleagues who do this research, we repeatedly produce positive results with very high confidence. And I wrote a book called The Astrology of Bipolar Disorder, A Scientific Breakthrough. So I'm claiming there's a form of astrology that works, but I'm not able to confirm the rules of the second group. I'm not able to confirm clearly, with clear measurable results, the ideas that astrologers use, like the zodiac signs, the houses, the aspects that they know and love. We have three groups. One that says astrology is nonsense. Another says astrology works. Another said there's a kind of astrology that works, but it looks almost nothing like what you guys are doing. And they all quote and repeat their studies and do more studies. And I'm coming out with new studies, every few months, another major new study confirming that this new paradigm works. Who's right? What's the future? This is what can happen in research. No matter how objective, how clear, how careful you are. And I'm fanatically careful and what we call conservative in my research methods in saying I found something. The cynics say, no, you didn't find anything. The modern astrologers say, no, well, our stuff's working great, And I'm saying, no, I can't confirm any of it. Research can end up in little boxes, not always malicious or greedy or money hungry. It's just the way that we frame things in a particular way and the way in which we can fool ourselves. We can have weaknesses in our study. So we need peer review. Everybody knows that. But we need peer review from the people from other points of view. So for my research, I need peer review from group one. The cynics, so far they won't look at my research. They've looked at the research of the people who do the usual astrology and they dismiss it. I email them, I tell them, let's talk about this. Here's, where you can buy my book or whatever. Include this, and they never do. They always are very polite. They say, oh, thank you very much. This looks interesting. They don't do anything. Also, cynics outside the field of astrology, the famous people who I know and love. I mean, I don't know them personally, but I love their work. I mean, Neil deGrasse Tyson, I think he's marvelous. I love his work. He's periodically dismissed astrology as nonsense. I've written him, I've written other people and said, let's talk about it publicly. Let's interface. Let's critique each other. Let's look at what we're doing. Of course, he's very busy. I'm not expecting a response, and so far I haven't gotten one. But somewhere along the line, it does no good for the critics and cynics of astrology to stand outside there and not look at what the other people are doing. They do look at the research of group number 2 sometimes, and they have some debates over it, but they don't look at group number 3, which is me. What is my point behind all this? Simple. To stop corruption. And sometimes it's not corrupt, it's not maliciously intended. But to stop this stagnation in research and people just holding on to their little piece of turf, we need communication between the different points of view. Going back to medicine, we need the people who are making these YouTube videos. Some of them are medical doctors, and they're saying this herb or this food or this diet works better. Here's the research. Works better than the drugs that everybody's taking. There needs to be a direct head-on interface. Research where both parties are involved, neutral parties, different points of view, resolve the differences of opinion. But as long as they don't talk to each other and they're just busy with their own work, there's not progress. And things remain fragmented and people end up getting therapies, getting advice that's not as good as it could be, to put it mildly. So we can resolve the problems of medicine. We can find out if these herbs and vitamins and minerals and other treatments really work and bring them into the mainstream if they do. Let's do it. We can find out if astrology is just total nonsense or a figment of people's imagination. Let's do it. Let's get the groups together. But as long as the cynics of astrology won't talk to me, the two worlds go on, just like the worlds of natural health care and standard health care, largely separate from each other. So the answer is to bring people together, to critique each other, have peer review by people who are not in the same exact way of thinking, the same tradition, and the same theoretical framework that you have. So these three groups in the area that I'm in, we can call the cynics, the astrologers, and the cosmobiologists. The cosmobiologists, of which I'm a group, we fall in between the cynics and the astrologers, because we cosmobiologists agree that with the astrologers that there is an astrology that works, but we are unable to confirm the ideas that the astrologers use, the signs and houses and whatever, just like the cynics. So we agree with the cynics that, whoops, just knocked over this light. We agree with the cynics that we're not able to gain support for most of those things, and we disagree with the astrologers. Thus far, that's where we're at. But we agree with the astrologers that there is a relationship of planetary positions to human behavior and personality, which the cynics consider to be absurd and ridiculous. These three very different points of view need to come together. To date, as I mentioned, the cynics have looked at some of the research of the astrologers. They have not looked at the research of the cosmobiologists, people living in their separate camps, only certain people talking to other people, despite the fact that I've made repeated requests for the work of the cosmobiologists to be acknowledged, which they won't do. They often politely say something like, your research looks interesting, but they do not mention it publicly or really look into it. And the cynics just keep criticizing the astrologers, rather than the people who've introduced new paradigms, new systems based on cutting-edge research methods. The astrologers have been supporting cosmobiologists. Many of the astrologers are unfamiliar with the cosmobiology research, but they are supportive. What I'm talking about here is the relationships between these disparate groups. Sometimes there's a little bit of friendly interaction, but nothing sufficient to really resolve the bring a unified understanding, and move forward. And from the world I'm in as a cosmobiologist, I have not taken the time to carefully go through the research of astrologers. But in my own research, whenever I use the ideas astrologers use, I'm unable to confirm the ideas until the last few months. Within the last few months, I decided to replicate the research by Kioski Tarvainen on astrological variables that correlate with the selection of marriage partners, in which he found very strong support for standard ideas in astrology, such as planets in the other person's first, fifth, and seventh house, and conjunctions and trines between the planets. I did this research hoping to confirm what Kioski found and add those as variables to my own research, but I found numerous flaws in his research. And I think that the positive results that he reports in his research, and which Correlation Journal endorses and promotes as some of the most outstanding research in astrology showing that it works, I don't see any support for the astrological hypothesis. I see numerous flaws in there. So, again, people in their own camps with their own results, own findings, we need to talk to each other. A second case, I did more research in introversion, extroversion, and I tried to incorporate ideas from the astrologers. People believe that modern astrology ideas work. They've found support for introversion, extroversion. My research finds no support for their ideas, but does find support for these alternative new ideas. It's rather amazing how research methods can reinforce our a priori assumptions. And a fundamental way to break that is to have peer review by people from other approaches who are using different theoretical frameworks. And I want to note also, this is not a problem of lack of competency. Many of these astrologers who are doing this research, they're highly academic, teaching at universities, part of research institutes. This is a problem in research in general. We need to keep attacking the problem from many different points of view until the truth emerges. There are often very subtle but powerful biases that are like invisible gremlins that can lead to incorrect conclusions. The solution, peer review, and peer review by people attacking the issue from different points of view. Needs to include people with other theoretical frameworks and perspectives. This is extremely rare in medicine, and in the field of astrology and cosmobiology, we are beginning to do this. So, astrologers found several weaknesses in my analysis of the introversion-extroversion. Now, here's the kinds of problems we face. I'm faced with the dilemma of, do I spend several days, a week, few weeks, however long it takes, to address all these criticisms, even though, I don't know if you hear that ambulance going by, but anyway, a little distraction there in the background. Even though I think it's a waste of time, I could be going on to my next research, but they're saying, oh, you didn't have the proper control group, oh, you didn't do this, oh, you didn't combine the plans together. It all takes time. Am I going to take the time and go back just to prove my point that I'm not finding any introversion-extroversion relationship to modern astrological variables, but I am finding these cosmobiology variables? It's probably worth the time to do it. We need to take the time, even though it can feel annoying. We need to take the time. The scientists may say, do I really need to read this guy's stupid book on bipolar disorder? Give me a break. I've got work to do. I have graduate students who I'm supervising. I have papers I need to write. Am I really going to distract my life into this? Well, some of us are going to need to. And these are the tricky details, the tricky problems that we face. Are we going to take the time to talk to these people that we completely disagree with? I'm not saying every time we should. I don't know if I'm going to take the time to go back over my introversion, extroversion research, reanalyze the data just another way, just to show that there is no relationship. It's already obvious to me there isn't to the modern astrology variables. But on the other hand, it would be good just to establish the communication. So this is what I'm suggesting. It's not simple, it's not easy, but we, in whatever field we're in, when our field is fragmented, like medicine is, with standard practice and all these alternatives going on, we need to do more than just say a few nice things and pacify each other. Because what's going on in modern medicine is much heavier and deeper than that. They're saying that a great number of these drugs are harmful, useless, and there's things that are free and simple that work way, way better. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars of wasted money and people's health and livelihood and well-being damaged. It's not a joke. We need to really face it. Same thing with astrology. People are spending millions and millions and millions of dollars on these services. Do they really work? Well, the three people who have attempted research, the cynics, the astrologers, and the cosmobiologists, they need to start talking to each other. Resolve these problems. Find out what's going on. Because as long as you don't talk to the people in the other camps, and the scientists just stay over here saying, oh, you guys are all nuts, and I'm doing my research using the same kinds of methodology that the cynics use, and the astrologers are in there saying, we're using those methods too, and we're getting supported. So we sit in our own little camps divided, the problem goes on and on and on. So that's it, my friends. The bottom line, researchers look for what they suspect can be found, and this is the purpose. We're trying to make discoveries, and we frame the world in a way that to pursue the research that we believe in, and we need people with different theoretical frameworks, at least different perspectives, to honestly and humbly compare, contrast, and critically assess the research. Peer review, as everybody knows, is important, but it needs to be much broader, much more intense, much more direct, and we need to find experts. What the cynics of astrology do is they find some popular astrologer who has no interest in research methods, critical assessment, and then they have an argument with them. What does that achieve? Nothing, except to strengthen our own position. It's like politicians who just want to prove their point. We need to get those three groups of researchers, the cynics, the astrologers, and the cosmobiologists, talking to each other. So medicine, frankly, is doing a very poor job at this. The fields of astrology and cosmobiology are starting to do a little bit better, and I am probably going to take some time to address some of the criticisms of my research by the astrologers. They're not terrible criticisms. I just feel like they take a lot of time to go over, and I've got better things to do than just to reanalyze 5 different ways what I've done, just to show that what I found will hold up under all these different ways of modeling the data. Feels like a waste of time, but is it a waste of time? Probably not, because we establish communication. We need to do this. Okay, that's it, my friends. If you're a subscriber, thank you very much. If you're a member, there's 2 levels of membership, $5 a month and $10 a month for either 1 or 2 live meetings with me each month. Thank you so much. You can pause this and read about the memberships if you want. Become a member. 3 ways to do that. Thank you so much for listening, my friends. God bless. Namaste.